Morning, everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the minigun. It's a weapon system used on HA-60G PAPOC for combat sector rescue. I'll start off a little bit about just basics about the weapon, talk about how it's made up, and then I'll talk about how it actually operates. So I'll start off with just the basics of the weapon. The weapon itself is designed to shoot 6,000 rounds a minute. That's upwards of pretty close to 100 rounds a second. Shoots. The Air Force actually limits that down to 2,000 rounds a minute or 4,000 rounds a minute via two triggers here. This one here is low rate, that's going to give you 2,000, and then high rate is going to give you 4,000 rounds a minute. Electrical circuitry controls all that whenever you hit the right trigger. The actual effective range of this weapon is out to 1,500 meters, but the round itself can travel up to 2 miles. You always got to be, just like any weapon safety thing, you always got to be cognizant of what's behind your target. So that's just the basic numbers and stuff about the weapon. Now I'll actually start talking a little bit about how the weapon's made up. Start off out on the end. You got a barrel clamp here and a flash suppressor. You got 6 barrels. You got a gun housing assembly, which is just the whole outer shell of the weapon itself. On this side, you have a guide bar, which I'll talk a little more about whenever we start talking about the cycle of operations. You have an aft gun support and a clutch assembly. Clutch is what actually engages and disengages to allow feeding of rounds. You have a housing cover and a safing sector. I'm going to pull off real quick. And then on the inside you have a rotor assembly, which attached to that is 6 tracks, which the 6 tracks hold in your 6 removable or your 6 bolts. So that's the actual makeup of the weapon itself. And yeah, now I actually start talking about how it operates. So, well, before I get into how it operates, it's not an actual major component, it's a sub-component of the system. Feeder delinker. It actually provides rounds are fed in via an ammo chute here. So however big your ammo can is, that's how much ammo you have. There's no reload in this thing, it just continues to pull until you run out of ammo. And then it delinks the rounds out of the actual ammo chute and feeds them off to the weapon. This thing does all that. There's no actual links that are fed to the gun itself. It's all delinked here. So this attaches to this side of the weapon. It, like I said, delinks the rounds a little bit, or delinks all the rounds and feeds rounds into the weapon. The guide bar is what I was talking about a while ago. The reason it's so important is because if anything is wrong with this guide bar, if it's bent, anything out of tolerances, the weapon's going to jam on you. It's probably arguably the most important component of the weapon itself. It provides 2 things. It provides the actual feeding of the rounds as they go in, and then as the weapon's operating in a regular Gatling gun profile, as the spent cases get back to this side of the guide bar, they're cammed out and fall down a brass chute to the ground pretty much. So that's pretty much the feeding portion of the actual weapon. Now jumping into a little further in depth how the actual weapon operates. Once it's fed, the guide bar cams the rounds in and it hands it off to each individual bolt. Each individual bolt carries one round around the elliptical camp path as the gun is operated or rotated, feeds the rounds, and then the safing sector, little component here, actually cams the bolts into a firing position, locks the bolts into the barrel, and then at that point the round fires. The elliptical cam path is roughly about 1.5 inches long, so it'll remain in battery for about 1.5 inches to allow the round to fire, allow all those propellant gases to exit out the end of the barrel before it starts unlocking the bolt from the barrel and extracting that round. So once that individual bolt reaches the end of the elliptical cam path, it starts the extracting process. It hits the reverse dwell segment, is what we call it, is what it's called. It starts extracting the round, continues to pull it out until it hits the back side of the guide bar, as I said earlier. Once it hits the back side of the guide bar, it's actually cammed out of the weapon and dropped overboard. For us, I'll actually provide another video that's a Dylan video that'll show this thing shooting on the ground. It's pretty impressive. But overall, that's how the basic rundown of how the weapon operates. So I'll talk to you a little bit today about just the basics of the weapon, the major components, what makes it up, and then how it operates. If any of you guys have any questions, just shoot me an email and I can explain a little more in depth. But that's all the time I have now. Thanks.